Hi, welcome back to Mountain Jim Card Collectibles. So today I want to talk about a term that really isn't used very often these days. I used to hear it a lot more in the 1980s than I currently do, but to me the term really is a great definition of our current kind of high gambling society, where we see sports gambling everywhere. We have people gambling into sports breaks, like say on Fanatics Live or whatnot, or other sites as well. And really, there's other things about this term as well, in relevance to just kind of stale items that, for one reason, are delayed in the way that they are progressing. So anyway, to start us off, the term I'm talking about is hang fire. And if you know what this term hang fire means, I understand. I mean, I started using a rifle and shooting pistols when I was age 12 for the most part. I'm like using my dad's 41 Magnum. I'm shooting, like 30-30s, 30-06s, 270s, whatever. So I really kind of have some experience with guns. And if you have a hang fire, I have had these before. You just keep pointing the rifle at what you're going to point. Eventually, you just cross your fingers that it goes off, okay? But I typically, I think I maybe had one hang fire in my lifetime when I was out, just target shooting. Anyway, it says here, and this is a Wikipedia definition, hang fire is an unexpected delay between the triggering of a firearm and the ignition of the propellant. But for the most part, this term means, like it says here, the phrase to hang fire has come to mean a delay in progressing, for example, from one task to another. Okay. So that's the best way to think about it, is this delay in progressing. And we can really think of, things in the sports card hobby, and I'll point a few out that come to my mind. But when you look at the whole culture of sports cards currently, you can't deny that we are kind of in a hang fire culture. And that takes me to the song by Hang Fire by Rolling Stones, which was kind of dealing with a similar culture in the UK in the 1970s that we currently have here in the United States. Okay? Hang Fire by the Rolling Stones is a satirical, upbeat rock song critiquing 1970s British economic decline and social apathy. The lyrics mock lazy, unemployed characters who refuse to work, preferring to gamble, put it all on 100 to 1 while waiting for wealth, highlighting a disillusioned, paralyzed society. And we have really kind of fallen into a hang fire society since the pandemic. I'm not seeing the type of jobs like I saw pre-pandemic. I'm seeing just really like not very good jobs, weird jobs that don't pay much, whatever. And then, all of this hyping up of investing in gambling, say, over just going out and doing, the typical grunt work, that a lot of people do. And we really see this in the sports card hobby at this point in time, or TCG, whatever. All the hype and the buying into breaks and gambling, all the hype of hitting that big golden ticket, your big card. And hey, you don't have to work. That's all you have to do. But let's face it, I mean, we see all the tragedies that come from this idealism, of gambling. People lose everything. They end up on the streets, whatever. There's a lot of bad stories of breakers, or gamblers getting into breaks, losing everything, It just goes on and on. And then I always want to just kind of heighten this up, the idiom use. Hang fire means to delay, hesitate, or remain in a state of inaction, which mirrors the character's stalled lives, okay? So when you look at, say, Fanatics Live, when you look at a lot of sports card breakers, when you look at a lot of sports card, YouTube gurus, they really hype up this idea of hang fire, It's dangerous. especially when it comes to gambling. But, another way of looking at hang fire is the idiom use. And so I'm going to go over a few hang fire issues that I have dealt with in the hobby. Okay, so really my first hang fire issue has to deal with Fanatics Live and their hyped up venue of pushing collectors, fans, whatever, into gambling on breaks, okay? I vaguely went over this. But really Fanatics Live has made this, a key pillar of their business. And let's face it, is it good for people? Is it good for the hobby? I would say no. I mean, it is degeneracy. It's gambling. Gamblers tend to lose. Yeah, they always hype up the winners, but let's face it, a lot of the winners, at the end of the year, they just break out even. I've been there, done that. And I know a lot of people will go, well, this is your only way of getting good cards that's affordable. Well, it is what it is. I don't feel like it's good for society. If we could get back to a society that caters more towards consumers and not just gamblers and gambling addicts, then I feel that we can kind of get rid of this hang fire sports card culture. So obviously this would be the top of my list. Okay, so my second hang fire card moment definitely revolves around PSA and its multiple conflicts of interest, besides monopolizing the grade market and buying out their competitors constantly. Everyone says how great PSA is. I would like to say how great PSA was is the key word there, all right? Because more and more people are being left with a bad taste about what PSA does. The first issue, that I have with PSA is, how they are allowing, I guess, other buyers to come in and try and purchase graded cards, which to me, that should just stop. That's the ugliest aspect of PSA to an extent, not to mention the fact that they are getting a reputation for damaging cards. Now, the issue I have with that is the fact that, well, PSA, when they sell these slabs and you have all your big gurus always hyping up PSA slabs, it's all about the protection. It's all about the protection. If it was all about the protection and protecting the card, you wouldn't have any damaged cards at PSA, okay? So they have to go in and figure out a way that they can slab up cards without damaging them, because we are getting so many stories of this happening. So right there, if they're such a great company, one, why haven't they figured out a way that they can slab up cards without damaging the cards, okay? And, this issue, that took place with this $45,000 graded Pokemon card, that was really, in the news aspect of the card hobby. And we don't really know, how it was settled. We know it was an expensive card. But overall, all we can say is PSA damaged a card. A lot of people felt like there was a conflict of interest that, maybe they switched the card out possibly, whatever, and give, this individual, a card that slipped so many grades, that it was like, what, a PSA 6 or something like that. I mean, so obviously, this is definitely a hang fire moment for sports card collecting, and the fact that the hobby tends to hype up a company that's kind of getting a reputation for damaging cards, So they need to find a new slab, obviously, and maybe a different way of grading cards that, the people who are putting them in the slab aren't damaging the cards. And you have to ask yourself, well, what's the holdup here? Why aren't we progressing? And that's my point, is this is just another hang fire moment in the hobby. Not to mention, all of the, fraud allegations that, a lot of people can relate to PSA as well. We have the Pokemon collector that submitted around 30 identical modern cards And they all returned as PSA 9 grades, although the buyback offers, were pretty low. But then all of a sudden he sees the same cards with PSA 10s on them without notification, which, let's face it, the conflict of interest at PSA is astounding. I just don't understand how this hobby can continue to prop them up on their shoulders and pretend that they're not doing what they're doing. Yes, PSA was an awesome grading company, but when you look at them now, you may as well just call them the hang fire grading company. I mean, give me a break, guys. So yeah, it's a bad look for the hobby at this point in time. Okay, so I saved the best for last, and to me, the biggest hang fire issue in the sports card hobby or TCG hobby, or just the trading card hobby in general, has to do with the monopolization and exclusivity of both grading and licensing rights from the sports leagues, okay? So when it comes to grading, we know that PSA has really created this big umbrella of other companies that operate under the PSA brand, all right? Like it says here, Collectors, the parent company of PSA, owns both SGC and Beckett, BGS, consolidating roughly 80 to 95% of the sports card grading market as of early 2026. To me, that's a big red flag for the hobby, okay? Freedom of choice is more or less illegal in this hobby for one reason or another. While operated independently regarding grading standards, all three brands share back-end resources and technology under Collectors. This consolidation has prompted calls for FTC investigation. Yeah, definitely. It's hard to deny it. But the problem with our hobby is, for one reason, we have so many hang-fire, stagnant issues that just never seem to progress and are always getting held up, that we just can't really move on. And so your inability to, have a freedom of choice for grading is one of the biggest red flags that I currently see, in our hobby. And of course, we can't deny the Fanatics Topps monopoly, okay? Now, some may argue that's not a full monopoly because they don't have the NHL, sports card licensing, whatever. Now, let's just say they did. Maybe someone could prove that they are legitimately a full monopoly, okay? But they still don't have NHL card licensing, all right? But once again, freedom of choice is illegal in the sports card hobby for licensed products, Yeah, you can buy all the unlicensed products you want. Hey, help yourself. But for licensed products, you have to bend the knee and only buy a specific brand's product. Now, why do you believe the sports card leagues would do that? Do they believe they're going to get more money from monopolies? I believe they do for one reason or another, which to me doesn't really make sense, but it is what it is. And it's really unfair towards collectors and just hobbyists in general. So as I'm guessing you all know, yesterday, March 31st, 2026, was the last day that Panini held the NFLPA sports card licensing rights, and now Topps owns that for the most part, okay? They have the licensing rights, so it does feel like a monopoly, all right? And your freedom of choice is gone. But like it says here, Fanatics has established a dominant near monopoly position in licensed sports merchandise and trading cards through exclusive long-term deals with the NFL, NBA, and MLB, secured by offering leagues equity stakes. Okay, so that is obviously what the leagues care about. The equity stakes, they're making more money, but the thing about these equity stakes is, like I said, what they've done is that for licensed products, licensed sports cards, they have made freedom of choice illegal. Because let's face it, just like me, when it comes to baseball cards, I'd rather buy a different brand than Topps. When it comes to basketball cards, I'd rather buy a different brand than Topps. When it comes to football cards, I want a different brand than Topps. But let's be fair, it would just be nice to be able to pick and choose like I used to in the 80s or 90s. So exclusivity is really stagnant for the hobby, in my opinion. And it's really turning the hobby into a hang fire hobby, Why can't we progress? Why can't we move on? Why are we always being held back and, kind of having to live and survive in a stagnant market, stagnant hobby, whatever? Well, this is why. It's a really big red flag for the hobby in general. Okay, so that takes me over to Panini and how they own the exclusive licensing rights to the WNBA. Hey, at least you guys still have some licensing rights. Hey, that's great, But here's the thing about freedom of choice. I'd like to buy WNBA cards, maybe of a different brand if I'm going to buy them, you see? And so, once again, exclusivity, monopolies just destroys freedom of choice, and it makes freedom of choice illegal on licensed cards, licensed products, whatever. And it gets to be exhausting, Now, all the NHL fans that get to buy Upper Deck products, you're lucky, all right? Hey, I wish, when I step up to buy MLB, NBA, NFL cards, I wish I didn't have to deal with the Topps Fanatics shit show, to say the least, okay? So you're very fortunate, but once again, what if I want to step out and buy licensed products of a different, card brand than Upper Deck? Yes, Upper Deck's my favorite card brand for the most part, but I'm just making this a great example of we don't have freedom of choice in the sports card hobby because of all of these exclusive agreements and monopolies that have more or less been created by the sports leagues, okay? So if you want to call, our current modern sports card hobby a hang fire hobby, I completely agree. Because let's face it, all of this is doing nothing but making the hobby more and more stagnant. So anyway, how do you feel about all this? Are you exhausted with all the hang fire issues that we have to deal with in the hobby? Or are you just going along with the flow, I'm noticing a lot more people on social media who are talking about just pulling out completely and not dealing with this anymore because, let's face it, when you take away people's freedom of choice, they just really feel like they've been cornered, put into a little box, okay? And there's a lot of other hobbies out there where you still have a lot more freedom of choice, And I just don't understand this need by the sports leagues to steal that away from us for the most part, I go back to, the 80s and 90s, when you could choose different licensed products, licensed cards. And hey, if you don't like this one, you can buy this one. I like that. And it also drives down the prices on these cards as well. So it makes them more affordable to the public in general. And let's face it, I just don't think the sports leagues like that. I think the sports leagues only care about one thing when it comes to sports cards. And what is that? Well, it's the money. They have what? An equity agreement with Topps Fanatics, Who knows what sort of agreements they have with Panini and Upper Deck. But once again, to me, it's the biggest, red flag of our hobby at this point in time. I went over some other issues, whether that's grading, the grading monopoly is just as bad or worse, and everything else that goes along with it. I just wish that we could start to progress and make some changes instead of always being held up in this kind of hang fire moment. So anyway, how do you feel about all these issues? I'd like to thank my subscribers. If you could hit the thumbs up button for me, I'd really appreciate it. And maybe hit the notifications for when my episodes come out. That'd really help me out. And if you're a viewer and you still haven't subscribed, hey, it's 100% free and would really help out my channel. So anyway, hope you have a great day. I'm out of here. Bye.